Hello, everybody. Welcome back to Show Prep Video 2. We are going to be doing Miss Persephone today with a lot of things, all the things. So I'm collecting all the things: shampoo, conditioner, brushes, hopefully scissors I won't have to use. Persephone has decided to become disgustingly dirty. She is full of vegetation. So we have to do a bit of a brushing on her. Now, I have just finished Misty's groom. So if you saw our first groom and bath video, you'll know that this is a bit of a lengthier process, that there's, multiple steps involved. With Misty, I forgot to video this. Actually, I forgot to do her conditioner spray at the end. So that happened off video. We'll hopefully remember with Persephone. But, it's a lot. It's a process. Thankfully, with Persephone, all this vegetation is surface. It is not stuck in her hair. It is not making knots. Otherwise, that would require even more attention. But just a reminder, they get brushed first. And the brushing is to make sure that there are no mats, no terrible clumps, like she's got a few back here, that need to be removed. Water does not help mats, at least not in my opinion. I'm not a professional groomer. There's going to be a groomer out there somewhere that's going to tell me that it's better to do mats wet with some product. And I have detangling product that I use when I need to. I actually haven't had to use it in years because I groom them often enough that nothing gets that bad, thankfully. When I used to only groom them a couple times a year, things would get that bad and I would stand here having to use, that detangler, like it's almost like mineral oil, to get those hairs nice and slick and come out of the mats. I did a lot more cutting. I don't have that problem now. I'm reaching further for the muck bucket because it's away from the stand so that it doesn't fill with water. You'll notice the floor is wet. That's because I just finished grooming Misty. And so yes, the floor, the stand, everything's already pre-wet, myself included, although I'm drying fairly quickly, just in time to get wet again. But anyway, so that's the process, right? We brush first, and for me, brushing to get out any clumps, any mats, is most important. I don't like doing it when they're wet. I think that actually makes the hair stick to each other more. Again, my opinion, not a fact. I am not a professional groomer by any means. I also think dogs and cats are a little bit different than goats, but not much. Once I get all of them brushed through, then we go in on one side for a shampoo. And then once that shampoo is done and rinsed, we'll go in with a conditioning round. I'll leave the conditioner in while I go ahead and do the other side, shampoo and condition. Then I'll leave that side in, come back and rinse the conditioner. Hopefully remember to spray the leave-on conditioning spray, give them one final brush through, and be done. So I'm not going to talk you through the whole thing, the whole process again, because you heard it all as I did it with Misty, but that's sort of what you're going to see. And what you're seeing now is brushing mats, or clumps really, not really mats, clumps, because she has gotten herself dirty, which is her style. Persephone is not a diva goat. She has no problem getting dirty. There are some goats I have that are very princess-like, right? They won't step in a mud puddle. God forbid they get dirty. They're horrified. They'll stay away from anything that's yucky or gross. Persephone, on the other hand, will go diving through it. If there's a puddle, she's going to be in it. If there's a pile of something to get in trouble with, she's going to be in it. And so that's why she's got all this vegetation and whatnot in her fur. Also, she faints a lot, which contributes to that problem because she's out there playing in, wet leaves or mud or a puddle, and then she falls over. And that's okay. Let goats be goats. If the goats want to be dirty, they can be dirty in between grooms. That's their option. So let's talk a little bit about what happens at the show and why all of this work is sort of important. First off, it's important for the health and well-being of the goat. Even if I never put them in a show, they would still or should still be given a bath, once or twice a year, just because they're outside, they're dirty, and they have all this hair, and they're just carrying that dirt around. It's not like a short-haired goat where it's surface, it rolls off them, they get in the rain or whatever, and it's gone. These guys are, they carry that with them, and it can make their hair matted if you don't look out for it. So that's the first and foremost, is all this work is actually for the health and well-being of the goat. And I will be doing this with all of our non-show goats as well, really through their next groom. Because once I'm set up to do it and I get into the routine, it's easy to just do them all. So I'll roll through the grooming schedule over the next 6 weeks and make sure that everybody gets a bath, even if they're not going into the show. The show goats are going to get 2 rounds, so they're going to get today, and then they're going to get done in another 6 days, so a little less than a week from now, because we're leaving for the show in a week. All right, so that side is brushed out. I'm going to come around and do the other side. Forgive the allergies. It's October, it's fall. You know that my colors haven't changed yet, but the pollen sure has. And it is killing me. I do take allergy medication, so please don't worry about that. I'm under the care of a doctor. I'm not going to die. We're all good. But I do have the sniffles a little bit, and all that fun runny nose nonsense that comes with an allergy season. And I have it all year long because I'm allergic to everything in the environment. I am allergic to grass and pollen and trees and dogs and cats and goats, rabbits, birds. And when I had allergy testing done years ago, every single thing they poked me with, except for the food stuff, popped. I'm not allergic to any food. I'm not allergic to any medicine, but the world is trying to kill me. And, it was recommended a long time ago that I should never have pets, and I should never, ever be exposing myself to all of the allergen triggers that I have. And I looked at them and I was like, are you kidding me? At that time in my life, I only had 2 dogs and 1 cat. Sorry, I had to move the muck bucket closer because it was getting ridiculous. But I wasn't going to get rid of my dogs and cats. That wasn't going to happen. I wasn't about to stop enjoying life and the things that I enjoy, nature, outdoors, bird watching, because, I have allergies. So I was like, look, you better figure out how to medicate the heck out of me so this works, right? Because that's just, changing my lifestyle is not going to happen for this. So the dosage, the amount of allergy medication that I take on a daily basis is kind of obscene, but it works for me. The other thing is, of course, I manage the environment in certain ways, right? There are no dogs and cats in my bedroom. There's no carpeting or draperies or upholstered furniture in the house. Everything is leather, hardwood, so that the dust and dander doesn't collect. Of course, there's extra cleaning involved to make sure that all the hair and everything is kept knocked down. But when I'm standing outside grooming goats in a fall breezy day, there's no saving it. So I try to keep that as off camera as possible, and I apologize in advance if you hear any sniffles or any sneezes. I did sneeze in the last video, which was awful. Really trying not to have that caught on camera, but it is what it is. Okay, so back to what happens at a show. So at a show, our shows run a little bit differently than other goat shows in terms of how they are managed. We run multiple judges in the ring at the same time. So there are lots of things happening. Because we don't have as many shows around the world and around the year that other breeds have, we need to pack it in. And you only have really 2 days to get it in because weekends are when shows happen. So it is critical for us to be able to do, like this round, this weekend coming up. Today's Friday, so next week. Our Saturday, Sunday activities will be 8 different goat shows with 8 different judges, but they will happen with 3 judges at a time on Saturday in the morning, then 3 judges at a time on Saturday in the evening, and then Sunday morning, 2 more judges, and then we'll be out the door on the way home packing up. And that is how we jam it in. So most shows, of course, only have 1 judge in the ring at a time. We do things a little bit differently just to have that efficiency and economy of scale, right? People travel for these things. You really don't want to only have, if we only did 1 show, 1 judge at a time, it would be 3 shows, right? Saturday morning, Saturday night, and Sunday morning. And that becomes not really worth it for people to travel for, to prep the goats, right? We do a lot more prep for our animals based on the coat and the things that we have to go through. So we do it to get that scale. So the goats will walk into the ring, hopefully. They are fainting goats, and they are goats, not dogs. So walking into the ring sometimes is a challenge in and of itself. The judges are watching as we walk into the ring. They are looking for several things. They're looking at how the goat moves, because that tells them a lot about the conformation of the goat's legs, their hocks, their gait, right? Is it normal? Is it stilted? Is it sloped? Are they hopping? Is there something that could possibly be an indicator of a fault in the conformation of their body? The other thing they're looking for is how the handler is handling things. Are we patient with our animals, or are we dragging them along? Are we enjoying the time with our animals, or are we getting frustrated and stressed and trying to rush and making things worse? Showmanship, which is that part of it, does factor in. It's not the only factor, and in fact, it's really, I'll call it a tertiary factor. But all things considered, if they're looking at 2 goats and those goats are equivalent in their mind, right? And the only difference then is how they're handled. And that could be the difference between putting yourself in the winner's circle and not. So once we get them into the ring and we get them established in like a semicircle, right? They sort of stand head to tail around the ring. Then you want to get them, quote unquote, stacked. And I'm really bad at that. Really, really bad at that. Thankfully, my goats, quote, stack themselves for the most part because they are conformed correctly. But stacking is really, it's what you see at a dog show when they put them like up on the little podium, or they stand them in front of the judge and you see them pick them up and move their legs and stuff to get them to stand perfectly. It's the same idea. You want the goat to stand in a way that shows off all of their assets, all of their perfect conformation, all of their traits. And there are tricks to, how to hide some faults, right? If your goat is a little tall, you can get them to squat a little bit. If your goat's a little bit steep in the rump, you can get them to kick their feet out a little bit and look a little bit longer. Like there are ways to manipulate that. Like I said, I'm really, really bad at it because you're standing next to the goat. You're not standing back to see them. So you really have to be well practiced at like exactly where your goat's legs and stuff need to be in order to get that right in the ring. And I don't get it right. So stacking can be important. My opinion, honestly, though, and again, this is an opinion, not a fact, is if you have to do a lot of manipulation with your goat, if you have to work to stack them so much so that you have memorized the position their legs need to be, and you kind of argue with them until they'll stay still in that position. And by argue, I don't mean, have a verbal debate with them. I mean, keep moving their leg until it stays in the position you want it to be in. To me, that actually demonstrates that there's something wrong with the goat, right? Is any goat perfect? No, they're not. But should they be correctly conformed enough that you don't have to do all that manipulation? Yes, they should. Again, my opinion, not a fact. Well, I'd like to say it's a fact, but right now it's an opinion. It should be a fact. And then as you're doing that, the judges, again, are kind of still standing back and observing. You don't have a lot of time to get them stacked. It's only a couple of seconds, sometimes a minute, depending on how long it takes to get all the goats into the ring and how early you were, right? If you're the last person in the ring, you've got 10 seconds to get your goat stacked. If you're the first person, you probably have a minute or two, which can work to your advantage or disadvantage because, of course, the longer the goat has to stay still, the more they don't want to. So once you have your goat stacked, the judges start to move around the ring. And they move from goat to goat, and they put their hands on the goats. So they will look at the goats' brightness of their eyes, they'll look at their face, they'll look to see if they have eye boogies, they'll look to see next how their chest is, right? And they will run their hand down their chest to see how thick or how solid that goat is in the chest. They'll run their hands along the top of the goat to look for that top line. They'll feel the back of the goat for the steepness of their rump. They'll go down the back legs to feel how those back legs are conformed. And this is exactly what the goat does when they're standing there. And then they will usually run their hands through the sides of the hair. And that's when they're assessing the coat quality. And if they run into a mat, if they run into dirt, if they run into vegetation, those are all things that will detract from that judge being impressed by your goat. What they are looking for is they are looking for a goat that one is, also conformed correctly. They don't check teats, they don't check testicles, which actually bothers me. But, they are looking at conformation. How does the goat stand? How is the goat built? Is the goat built appropriately to do goaty things, i.e. breed and give birth? The other things they're looking for, and most importantly, when they're laying hands on the goat, is the texture of the coat, the feel, the silkiness, the shininess, right? And if they find a mat or if they run into a spot that isn't quite brushed out and silky, that'll turn them off and your goat won't win, right? So in our breed, coat comes first, conformation comes second, and there is no assessment of the mammary or reproductive units, which again, I don't like. I've talked about that before. I think that that's a huge problem with our breed, because there are animals that have faults in their mammary system, have faults in their reproductive system, testicles that don't drop, extra teats, things that may not necessarily harm that individual goat's health and longevity, but you don't want to populate that in your herd, right? Like, it's not natural, it's not normal, it is actually a genetic mutation, and it shouldn't be passed down. And because it's genetic, it will get passed down. Even if it doesn't express itself in the next generation, it will be passed down through their genes and could express themselves in grandkids, you know, especially as you sell babies and you don't know who they're going to get bred to. I'm just not a fan of it, right? I think that if the animal has more than 2 teats, they're only supposed to have 2 teats, then they should be disqualified. I think that if the animal doesn't have 2 testicles descended, that they should be disqualified. There's nothing, again, wrong with not, you know, for that particular animal, it's not going to necessarily harm them, although there is, you know, a thought that there's cancer linked to undescended testicles. But, you know, that individual goat may be fine, but we should be looking at the ability for that goat to appropriately procreate. And I don't believe that a goat with that type of fault should be procreating. My opinion, there's, you know, scientific evidence, of course, that these things are passed on, they are genetic, they do continue in a line, so it is not something that you can just say, well, this individual goat has it, but it, you know, it's limited to the goat, right? There are some things that are just limited to that goat and may never, you know, aren't genetically linked, and that's fine. That's a whole different ball game. But things that are genetically linked should not be passed down generation to generation when you know that it's not an appropriate way for that goat to be. Now, I've been taking a long time to brush Misty out. Misty, that's her mom. Persephone out. She's got a couple of really big clumps under here, under her belly, that I've been working on as we've been talking. So, just so you know where we're at, and the length of this video continues to grow because I still have to shampoo, condition, rinse, blah, blah, blah. So once the judges have all walked around the ring, touched every goat, looked at every goat, had a chance to potentially ask the handler a question or two, because sometimes they want to know the age of the goat, sometimes they want to know if the goat happens to be pregnant or if the goat has had babies, because that does factor into the development of the goat. And if the goat has not had babies yet, their pelvis may feel differently than a goat that has had babies. So, you know, they'll ask about that. They'll ask about the age. You know, 4-year-old goat is going to be a different look and feel than a 3-year-old goat. So those things do factor in. Then the judges will step back and start to make decisions. Now, they may come back and start touching goats again as they're narrowing their decisions down, right? They've sort of mentally eliminated their bottom goats, and they're working now on their top goats. In large classes, where there's maybe a dozen or more goats to be judged, some of the judges will ask that their top 4 or 5 goats step forward for easier assessment against each other, because they may not be near each other in the initial setup of the ring. And they want to do a more close comparison so that they can start to pick, you know, 3rd place over 2nd place, 2nd place, 1st place, that type of stuff. So there are multiple stages that could happen. Once the judges make their decision, and they can ask you to walk your goat again, they can ask you to turn your goat around, they could ask you to move your goat next to a different goat, right? There's lots of things that a judge can ask you to do, and you need to be prepared to do. as they assess your goat against the other goats in the ring. Once that's all done and they've submitted their placements to the show steward, then they will start to announce. And we do one judge at a time, of course, to announce their placements. And it's always interesting because you got 3 judges in the ring at the exact same time judging the exact same goats, and their perspectives will be different, sometimes drastically different, right? Where like somebody's first place goat is the other judge's last place goat. It can happen. It has happened. So when you're listening to the judge give their reasoning for why they placed the goats where they did, and they don't say it for every goat. They just basically say, like, this is my 4th place goat, or we start with first place, actually. So this is my first place goat, and I chose this goat over my 2nd place goat because of blah, blah, blah. And then this is my 2nd place goat. I chose this goat over my 3rd place goat because of whatever, right? Whatever they felt they saw or needed. And they'll go through that down to 4th place. If we only have 4 goats, everybody gets a ribbon. If we have more than 4 goats, then all the other goats just sort of, stand back. Okay, I think we're finally ready to do some shampooing. And she's going to hate this and she's going to scream, so bear with it. So once all the judges have announced their placements, that particular show for that class is over. And every class, there are usually, 18 classes, I think, in each show, and they're based on age, right? So the age of the goat drives what class they're in. Once all the classes for that segment of the show, and there are 4 segments to the show, actually 5, I lied. The first segment is junior does, the 2nd segment is senior does, 3rd segment is junior bucks, 4th segment is senior bucks, and then the 5th segment is wethers. Wethers are shown separately and not separated by age. Actually, they are separated by age, but not as significantly as the breeding animals are. So once the goats in your class have been judged and assessed, if you have won 1st or 2nd place, your goat is going to continue to be in the ring at the end of that show for the grand champion and reserve grand champion assessment. If you have not won 1st or 2nd place, your goat goes back into their stall and they're done for that show. So once all the classes in a segment are complete, so all the junior doe classes are complete, for example, and that's usually 8 classes in the junior doe section because they are segregated. Babies develop so fast, right? You have a 0 to 3 month, a 3 month to 6 month, a 6 month to 9 month, 9 to 12, etc. So once all your junior doe classes are complete and you have 1st and 2nd place winners from each of those classes, those 1st and 2nd place winners come back into the ring the same way they did for the class, and they get lined up with the 1st place winners in front of the 2nd place winners. And they are being judged now for grand champion and reserve grand champion. Reserve grand champion is essentially runner-up. It doesn't come with any points. It's just a nice acknowledgement that your goat was right there at the top. Grand champion is how you get a point for your master champion journey. So all of the 1st place goats are judged against each other. You cannot, they do look at the 2nd place goats, but you cannot pull your grand champion from a 2nd place goat, because if it were 2nd place in its class, then how could it possibly be the best of the entire segment if it wasn't the best in its class? See what I mean? So it has to be from a 1st place goat. Once the grand champion is assessed, now that goat, of course, gets a master champion point. It gets, potentially it finishes its master championship, right? So there are lots of benefits and lots of bonuses, and of course, huge bragging rights for having a grand champion goat. Once the grand champion is selected, the second place goat that was standing behind that grand champion goat can step up into the first place line. And it can now be judged against the other first place, because it has not been judged against those other classes. It has only been judged against its class. And it's certainly possible that that particular class of goats, the second place goat in that class, is actually better than the first place goats in the other class. That's possible. So that goat gets to step up. All the other second placers are pretty much done at that point. Reserve grand champion is then pulled from that first row, right? That all the rest of the first placers plus the second place that was behind the grand champion. And once that is done, now your grand champion animal is the only animal that still got things to do in that particular show. So the grand champion animal, once all of the segments are done, so junior and senior does and bucks plus wethers are finished, and we have now 4 grand champions. Those 4 grand champions will go into the best in show judging. And best in show judging can include master champions from whenever, right? So if your goat is a master champion and you want them to be in the best in show class, you can enter them into the best in show class and actually win best in show without even being really in the show, because you're a master champion. So you don't show again, you just show, end up in the best in class show, which is pretty cool. So it has happened many times where the judges take a look at their grand champion selections, so the 4 goats that they made grand champion, and then look at the master champions that have been entered, and we'll say, from those animals who are all kind of the best of the best, there's a master champion that's the top, and that goat wins best in show versus one of the grand champions. So that keeps things very competitive. It keeps things very interesting, right? Moves things along. And that's how it works, right? So you have your best in show animals. Best in show does not give you a master champion point. Only grand champion does. Best in show is bragging rights for sure. It's an honor, no doubt, right? Like that your goat has competed against other grand champions, other master champions, and that judge assessed your goat to be the absolute best. So, amazing honor, no doubt, but it's bragging rights. And so I don't bring my master champions to the show. I don't pay to put them in the best in class show. It just doesn't do anything for me. And if it doesn't do anything for me or the farm or our reputation, there's really not a reason for me to do it. There are lots of reasons to do it, though, aside from bragging rights. If you do go to a lot of shows, if you are able to travel around the country and go to most of the shows, then you are potentially able to rack up some serious wins, right? So if your goat is really that good and continues to get best in show wins, you can be assigned or essentially earn the title of the winningest farm of the year. Your goat could be the winningest goat of the year, right? And I know that's not a word, but that's how it's said. Meaning that your goat won the most out of every goat that ever went into a show in our breed. Or your farm, won the most out of every farm that competed that year in any show around the country. So definitely big bragging rights if that happens, right? And certainly should solidify the reputation that your goats are of a quality that you can sell them for more than other breeders, you know, and that you should, you know, there should be pretty significant demand on your herd and your babies for that reason, right? Coming from a herd that's been awarded so many throughout the year. So that's how a show works, and that's what really goes on. And I will try to get some videos from the show, but to be perfectly honest with you, when I am in the show or at the show, I am focused on the show. I am not, I don't know how to say it. Like, that's just, I am in a zone, right? I am completely, woo, spider. I don't even know where he came from. Yucca. I'm all for spiders, but not when they're on my neck. So that was fun. Sorry, I'm having a moment now because all I can think about is there was a spider crawling on my neck, and where did he come from? Anyway, what the heck was I saying? Oh, so, you know, breeding rights, being able to sell your animals for a little bit more value, and frankly, being able to market your animals, right? There should be a demand for them, which should help you if you want to grow your herd and become a larger breeder. You know, that should help you because it generates the demand that you need. But those are some of the reasons to show. That's not why I show. And I've told you guys this before. I show because I want to get the judge's opinion on my goats. I want to know, you know, from a third party kind of neutral observer, what they think about my goats, what they're seeing, you know, because you get confirmation bias, right? I look at my goats and I'm like, oh, my goats are perfect. They're beautiful. They're the best. And then I get in the show ring and they don't even place, you know, first or fourth. And I get a chance sometimes to talk to the judges afterwards, never before, always after. So after the judge has finished showing and there's no opportunity to influence their decision, I will sometimes, if they're willing to talk to me, ask them a few questions about what they saw or didn't see in my goat that would have changed their mind, right? And the reason I do that and the reason I want that information is because it absolutely influences breeding decisions, right? If they look at my goats and they see something that I can change, then, you know, that influences how I breed, who I breed to whom, what animals I look to keep versus which ones I may decide to take out of my program. All of those things factor in. And I don't necessarily always agree with the judge. And that's another thing, right? The judge may look at my goats. In fact, I had this once, right? Where the judge looked at my goats and they said, you know, you have beautiful goats. Their coats are great. They're in, you know, perfect conformation, but they're too large. Now, they're well within standard. And we height measure and we do all the measurements. And the show does all the measurements. So there's no way that the goats are out of standard. So to say that they're too large, frankly, is inappropriate because they're well within standard. And the argument I would have, and certainly, you know, I don't argue because it's the judge's decision and their decision is final. But, you know, if they're choosing and selecting a smaller goat for no other reason than the goat is smaller, that's not part of our visual standard. That's a personal preference. And that starts to lean into subjectivity. Now, I told you, you know, the judges sometimes vary so vastly in their opinions of the same goats in the same ring at the same time that it's amazing. And that is all sort of normal, right? Because at the end of the day, no matter how much you try and adhere to the visual standard, the breed standard, the rules around the breed. The long and the short of it is there's a subjectivity to it that can't be avoided. And there are going to be personal preferences and biases that come into play. And that's part of the game, right? There is a judge that I actually show under consistently. Love her to death. I love chatting with her. Her opinions and her feedback are amazing. But to date, she has never once ever placed my goats, ever. And that's even if they weren't bred by me and I just bought them. And I find that fascinating. But, you know, after she decided to retire from from judging, I decided to ask the question, like, why, right? You tell me all the time that my goats have perfect conformation. You agree with me that some of my goats need more coat. I'm okay with that. I get that. But yet, over the years, even with goats that I have purchased, you have never, ever, ever placed a goat that I'm showing. And her short answer, quite honestly, was she didn't appreciate and didn't think that I was showing them well. And that was really hard to hear, but also really eye-opening. It brings about a different level of self-awareness, right? And, you know, I was taken aback for a minute, and then I said, well, I need to hear more. Can you give me more information, right? Can you tell me what it is you don't like, or can you pinpoint or give me some examples? Can I get details? And she was really willing to be open and honest. And she's like, you know, you emanate sort of stress. And I think to myself, like, really? I'm the most laid back person ever, right? I don't go into this expecting to win. I don't even go into this thinking that I'm ever going to win. It's nice when I do, and it has happened, but it's certainly not something where it happens all the time. And more often than not, it happens, and I'm just, you know, I'm pretty shocked. And she says, that's exactly it. What? Like, I was so confused, right? But she had and took the time to talk to me and explain it to me. I know you're done. I know, baby. She took the time to talk to me and explain it to me. And what she really said was that I was trying too hard, was probably the easiest way to describe it. I was projecting and trying to be so perfect in the ring that it was radiating down the leash into the goat, right? And I was, you know, you think about it and you're like, what? How is that even possible? You know, I'm in a ring with a bunch of goats that aren't behaving, that are acting a fool, that are fainting, that are hollering, that are peeing and pooping. How exactly am I trying to be perfect? Right? And I couldn't wrap my head around it. And she started to explain. She's like, you stand ramrod straight. You are holding the goat in what we would call the perfect conformation stance, and it's, you know, fabulous because we can see your goat is lovely, but they don't look comfortable. And I said, but I don't even stack my goats. She goes, I know you don't stack your goats at all, which is amazing, but you're still standing there with this, you know, like, I have to be on point, full attention, you know, 5-star general on deck kind of thing. And you just need to relax. And I had to laugh. I said, I cannot believe that you think I'm not relaxed, because I really think, I think to myself, like, I'm totally relaxed in the ring. What are you talking about? So I had the husband take some video while I was showing. And wow, right? Like, yeah. Now that I was looking for it, now that I was informed that it was something I was doing, it was instantly obvious. I was actually standing at, like, military precision. And no, I'm not ex-military or anything else. And I guess in my mind, right, like I was trying to do that to respect the judge, respect the judge's time, be alert, be aware of what they were doing, what they're looking at, trying to respond, trying to ensure that I'm not in a position where I'm blocking their view of the goat. And there are lots of showmanship rules and regulations that, come along with being in a ring, but I had taken them to the extreme, right? And the helpful part of the video was looking at sort of the other extreme, where there's people that just sort of slump into the ring, stand there holding their goats, could care less, or sort of looking around and talking to their other folks and, shouting at their kids across the way, or just like what I would have considered being almost disrespectful to the process. And those are the goats that were winning. So yeah, sometimes you can take things too far and too much to the extreme. And even if your goats are fabulous, they're responding to you as the handler. They're responding to what you're doing. And my goats were responding to the fact that I was being who I am. Well, thank you for that. Being who I am. So needless to say, I did actually take that very much to heart. I did change up and relax a little bit more. It did absolutely improve the performance of my goats in the ring. Same goats, same judges, just different performance results. And I did not change my respect for the process. I did not change my attention to what was happening and what the judges were seeing and looking at, and all the showmanship activities, like moving my body so it's not blocking the view. I just did it quite a bit more casually and, frankly, quite a bit more naturally. And it was amazing how much different I felt at the end of the show. I wasn't exhausted. I wasn't frustrated. It's not the good word. I guess I wasn't disappointed. I felt much more as if I had been at a social event that just happened to include goats than at some performance where, I was on stage. And so, yeah, that was a huge learning. I wish I had learned that several years and lots of shows beforehand. But I did learn it, right? And I did get that bit of information. And I never would have gotten it if I hadn't asked the question. So the other lesson there is, right, don't be afraid to ask the question. Other things, over the years that I used to be afraid to ask, like I didn't want to ever ask another goat owner how they prepared their goat, because that's, that's a secret. That's the secret sauce on how you prepare your goat. But I did ask because I was starting to get kind of annoyed with the fact that I knew my goats were good and they weren't getting looked at in the same way. And so finally I sat down with one of the breeders that I had purchased goats from, and I said, what the heck do you do that I'm not doing? Sorry, my head's probably just bounced all the way through the screen. I didn't even think about that. So I did ask, and that's how I learned some other things, right? And that's how I started to decide that, grooming on a regular basis, keeping them maintained, putting in the extra effort throughout the year and not just in preparation for a show was the better methodology for me. And it became almost a soothing activity for me, right? Like this is why I use a comb, because now I found a little hidden tangle that I can take care of. Grooming on a regular basis, not the bath grooming, this is hard work, but the grooming that I do on a regular basis, cutting their hooves and just brushing them out and keeping their coats sort of tangle-free, mat-free, makes a huge difference in the prep work for a show. And it makes a huge difference in the overall health of the goat's coat. And it was noticeable in the ring. It was noticeable by the judges. It made a difference. Using some different products, so not using Dawn, right? All those things have to be learned, and the only way they can be learned is by talking to people who have already learned them. So now you know all the secrets of the show, all of my failures as a goat handler and goat preparer, and Persephone is about done with this whole thing. She's actually been much more patient than I expected her to be. We've got one more side to rinse off, and then we've got to do her head. And then she is free and clear. And I will be pulling Lotus out next. So one of the things, if you've stuck around this long, is I would love to know if this is helpful, if you enjoyed this. Well, heck, I guess if you stuck around this long, you must have enjoyed some of it. Should I keep going with these, or should I not bother filming the baths because they'd make the videos too long? And I'm asking because, I don't want to put out content and put out videos that nobody's interested in or that nobody can tolerate watching because they don't like the noise or whatever. So since this is my first year filming and grooming and filming bathing, let me know what your thoughts are. Let me know if this is okie dokie. You're going to get stuck with at least 2 more after this one because I'm filming 4 today. So we've got Persephone. I already did Misty. Next up is Lotus, and then Sock Monkey. So you're going to get 4 regardless, but I can whoa up and not film, the Denali bath and all the rest of the non-show goats if this is not something that you find valuable or entertaining in the least. And it won't offend me, because if you guys don't want to see it, it just means that I will put my headphones on and listen to a book or a podcast instead of yammering at you. So all is okay with that. I know, she is so done. Poor thing. You've been up here so long and you've been so good. We got 2 more steps. Now this poor thing, if you want to see some more of this, I will be doing this again in a week for all the 4 goats. And yeah, this is why I use a comb. While they're all ultra conditioned and everything is put through, I use a comb to find these last mats, these last tangles that are typically hidden with all the dry hair. I'm hearing water running, and I know it's not from me, and my hose is not running. Nothing is leaking, so one of the goats must have gone into the stall and urinated. And my goodness. All right, so this has gotten her 90% of the way ready for show. She has to go through this torture one more time, and then we'll get her to that 100% prepared, where we clean all the eye boogies and the rear end goop and all the things that happen. But we've got to do your head, girlfriend, and I know nobody likes it. I know it. I am sorry. I don't remember where I set the camera. I'm not sure if you guys can see the floor or not, but at this point in the process, my floor is covered in water. It doesn't appear to be draining. It's totally normal because what's happened, of course, we have a drain cover on. I know, thank you. And that drain cover is collecting all the hair and the dirt and everything else that we don't want in the drain. So I have to actually scoop that out in order to get the floor to drain. It does actually drain really well, which is why when I put Persephone up just minutes after finishing Misty, the floor was not covered in water. It was simply wet. But right now I'm standing in puddles. Isn't that right? I know. I know. I know. It has to be done. It has to be done. And you sort of kind of like it because they all like lift their head for me. Okay. Can I have this back? Put this over here. So it's out of the way. Little rinse, a little condition, and a little rinse, okay? This is the part nobody likes. It runs down your front, so we'll have to check and make sure you still got condition there. I know, I know. Condition, condition. It smells good, doesn't it? You smell good now, and you still got schmutz everywhere, but this is loosening it up so that we can get it out next time. Let's replace just a hair of that on your chest. I know, I know. All right, conditioner out of the way. Brusha, brusha. Makes your bangs all sexy. Look, you got the side swoop. All right, guys, if you're still with me, we're just about done here, I promise. It is rolling into the last rinse. She has had enough. I have had enough. I still have 2 more goats to do. But I really do appreciate you being here. I love the fact that you are enjoying these, or at least I think you are, or I hope you are. I just took a face full of that. So I hope you are having a fabulous day. I hope that everything you want is happening and everything you don't is not. And we are going to let Persephone get back into the herd. So take care of yourselves, take care of each other, be kind, and I will see you at the next one. Bye for now.